And hello everyone, we're thrilled to welcome you to tonight's presentation of OTF Connects. We've got Augmented Learning in the Classroom with Tina Zita. And Tina, I'm going to hand things over to you and just thank everyone for joining in tonight. I'll stick around in the chat box throughout the evening, so let me know if you run into any troubles. But in the meantime, it's over to you, Tina.
I can't hear anything. Oh, probably have to turn these bastards on.
So hopefully folks are able to hear and interact. So good evening. Hope everybody's having a great day. Super excited tonight to be chatting about augmented learning in the classroom. And so awesome to see so many familiar names and faces. Not really faces, it's more your names, but that's all right. We're going to try, this topic is kind of hard to do without actually experiencing the technology a bit, so we are going to push the envelope a little bit, and hopefully the technology all cooperates for us. So just a little bit about me. My name is Tina Zita. I am a modern learning resource teacher with the Peel District School Board. Some folks on the list get to hang out. We get to hang out together sometimes, and some of us have even done some augmented reality, virtual reality recently. So as we go through tonight, feel free to connect on Twitter or in the chat box. We try to keep this pretty informal and fluid, so whenever you have questions, just drop them in or raise your hands so we can really build on that. And as the night goes on as well, we've set some pauses because the topic tonight is a topic we hear a lot about, I guess, around, but we haven't necessarily really explored it in detail in education. So our hope tonight is really to learn from each other. I know you each have great ideas and expertise, so hopefully we can build on that as the night goes on. Feel free to connect with me on via email as well, just tina.zita@plsb.com. So like we said, for tonight we kind of have really those three goals, just understanding what augmented and virtual reality are and why we would want to use them in the classroom. We would then want to look at some possibilities, and we really want to have that balance. So that balance between consuming AR and VR, and then how can students contribute in ways that do not break our bank. Because I know 360 cameras are awesome, but sometimes hard to get our hands on. And then as we want to, as we do often in the sessions, we want to really take some time at the end of our session tonight to consolidate that learning and start thinking how we can apply them in the classroom. So we want to see what those takeaways are, because in sessions like tonight, we often can see a lot of ideas, but we really just want to tap into what's that one idea that we think we could take back to our classroom and implement in the next little while. And I'm glad you like the slides, Melanie. So before we get started, let's spend a little bit time getting to know each other a bit better. So can you just in the chat box tell us a bit about you? So who you are, where you're from, what you do, and we'll get into a bit more detail on the next slide. Glad to have you with us, Kelly. David, you probably have ideas to share with the group tonight. James, happy to have you with us. French immersion, Ottawa Catholic, very cool. Oakville, that's awesome, Jess. Glad to have you with us. Jen, what's KPDSB? I know I should know, but I'm a little stumped. Cyril, long time no see. Claire is back to you. You guys are awesome. So a bunch of us were actually at the Brampton 905 Egg Camp this weekend. So it's awesome to see all those familiar names. Hewlett Patricia District School Board. Very cool. Nice to have you with us, Jen. We have a few more people chatting. Karen, what's BEPS? I feel this is the coolest part about the OTF sessions. Always learn new roles, new places. Oh, there you go. Egg Camp London, April 28th. Very cool. I'm glad you like the Egg Camp, Natasha. Very cool. Egg Camp 905 was just the Egg Camp for the Brampton, Mississauga area, so the 905 area code. Broadmoor Public and Superior Greenstone District School Board. Very cool. So we'll give you a minute or two to just add your description there. We just want to get to know each other so that we can adjust the tools and the resources that we show you tonight, just so we can fit them as best as we can to some of the explorations you're doing. The apps we're going to look at tonight for sure are very broad, so we'll be able to see how they fit into what we're exploring. Julie, that would be a great question. I'm not sure if there's, I know Egg Camp has their main website. I don't know if they post all of the Ontario ones. There's a Hamilton one coming up, London. Yeah, so Natasha, when it comes to creating augmented reality, I'm still a little stumped, but Aurasma is still my go-to. We were playing with Blippar a little bit. It looks like it has some potential, but Aurasma is pretty much the only one that you can make public for free. Just kind of a catch. Okay, so you can keep dropping your descriptions there on the side. Thanks, Melanie, for dropping that link. That's awesome. Our next question, we want to just know what division you're in. It seems like a lot of primary, junior, probably a mix as usual. So, oh, some folks beat me to it already. So on the side there, there's a little clip art tool. If you want to just drop a little symbol there. Yeah, thanks, Louise, for that reminder. So it looks like we have a few primary folks, a few junior folks, some intermediate folks, so a mix as usual. Always great to see. And we'll just give people a few seconds here. I know we get to be special, Jen, supporting kindergarten to grade 12. It definitely is interesting. As I was hanging out with some intermediate kids today, and we were creating they were showing off their collaborative art pieces with Makey Makeys. It's cool to see that connection of what it looks like in a grade 4 classroom, grade 8, and then what it could look like in high school, right? Okay, we're going to go to the next question. Again, feel free to drop it into the chat box if you didn't have a chance. Our next question for tonight would be, what is your definition of virtual reality and augmented reality? So you can either use the text box, the little the icon you see on the side that has the A, and add it to the screen, or you can drop it into the chat box again. I feel like we need background music.
That could probably be arranged, Tina.
One texting at a time. We'll add that to the next one.
Sorry, just realized I never actually helped people find that text tool. Fourth tool from the top on your whiteboard toolboard tool strips, and you have two options. There's a little plain text tool, which is a plain capital A, and if you click that little black triangle in the corner, you'll get that. The default is a text box. If you want to write lots and lots, the text boxes work better.
Kelly, I like your description there of things appear that are not really there. Definitely. Static 3D visuals, seeing things that appear that are not really there. An imaginary world we can explore. Clara, that has to be the best description ever. A world that's fat, not flat. I always remember my nephew saying pop-up shapes for 3D solids, and had to be a clever description. I love that description of augmented reality as a virtual aspect placed onto reality. So you guys are all pros. I'm sure we're going to learn lots together tonight and from each other. And that's a great point too there, with virtual reality being in a reality and augmented reality adding to a reality. Very cool. So I think these are going to lead into our next piece, definitely as we explore just what are those definitions of virtual reality, augmented reality, and the continuum of experiences. But on the next page, we want to think about what are some of the questions we'd like to tackle tonight. Hopefully we'll be able to address them in our plan, but if not, we can maybe make time for them in our plan as well. So hopefully I'm not cutting anybody off. Keep dropping them in the chat box if you like. But there's our, what questions do you have? Again, you can place them on the screen or in the chat box. It's up to you. What is it that you're really hoping to answer at the end of our time together, or start exploring tonight in our conversations? I love the conversations of using it in outdoor learning and how we can connect there. We'll definitely be looking at some tools. And the age level piece is always interesting. I haven't seen any restrictions on AR. I know sometimes there's restrictions on VR, and we'll talk about that a bit tonight. And that's the one thing, a great point someone mentioned, they haven't started with AR, VR yet. I think one of the things that I've noticed is that I've done it mostly with mobile devices. I know every now and then I stumbled upon an article that would say you could do it with a Chromebook, but I haven't found any apps per se that really make it possible. One of the things I did find that really changed the game with AR is that Apple released the AR kit, which allows developers to create AR content. And even with the new Samsung phone, I know they're pushing the emojis, depersonalized AR emojis as well. So I think we'll see more and more of that coming as time goes on. Very cool. So we'll have some cool moments. AR and VR, if nothing else, you get to have some cool moments you can take back. Communicate their learning. Cool. So we'll definitely look at some AR apps. There's definitely more AR apps to explore, especially for that consumption piece of using them to explore. Creating, again, there's a couple there that I've looked at. I know the creation piece is something that I wish we could get into a little bit more. Pokemon Go is definitely an example of AR, Melanie. Great example. Chatterpix, I don't know if you would consider Chatterpix AR because it's not really an augmented layer put on. So when you think of a filter and how a filter moves with you, I think that's kind of the difference, where with Chatterpix you're altering a static image, not altering a live image. I'll show you an example in a few minutes just because there's a great, just a quick app where you can put a layer of text on a picture, and I think it will speak to that, Natasha. Okay, so lots of great questions. We want to talk about integration. And I am by no means an AR or VR expert, so I'm really hoping this tonight is really more of a conversation. It's definitely something that's a hot topic out there in the world, and it's becoming its own text form. So how can we really help students understand this text form, whether it's receiving information through it or communicating and sharing information through that text form? Okay. So if anybody has another question, feel free to drop them in the chat box. And like I said, anytime tonight, just drop them in. And we do have some pauses built in, but love building off the questions and the comments that people post in the box. Okay. So why this topic and why now? So AR and VR is definitely a hot topic just out in the world. And I don't know if Louise can drop in the 2 links there. Hopefully I put them in. One of the things I just even noticed is how much AR and VR is becoming a natural part of around us. So some of you may have seen that. Oh, thanks. Thank you, Louise. So the first link you see there that Louise dropped in is House of VR. Downtown Toronto, they're actually creating VR cafes or clubs where people go and play VR games. And I think it definitely speaks to the passion and interest there is for VR, especially when it comes to the gaming world. But we're starting to see that shift away from VR just being for gaming and more people really capitalizing on the experience. So tonight we're going to look a little bit at how the UN's using it to communicate. Huffington Post uses it to communicate their stories. So a lot of people are really using it as their main or as a standard form of communication. But then there's people that are kind of pushing the envelope. So has anybody been to the AGO to see the Reblink exhibit? I haven't been. Every time I see a picture posted, I want to go again. So AGO right now has an exhibit on in some of their halls where with the app that they've created, you can interact with different pieces of art. Oh, very cool, Natasha. So at the AGO, Doug Pete actually reflected on his experience with the whole series. But they've taken artwork and then they've created a reinvented version of the artwork that comes in with that augmented piece. So not only are we playing with that concept of what art could be, but it's also reinventing or recreating, remixing in a different format, I guess you could say. James, you liked it? Hey, Natasha, we'll have to have a meetup down there. Oh, Melanie, next time. So I think it really just speaks to that piece that AR and VR is creeping into society. So we're seeing it pop up here, there, and everywhere. I was even watching on Instagram, and a colleague works for OCAD, and some of her students were creating VR experiences to teach kids about health concerns. And it was around mindfulness. So many ways that people are starting to maximize and create with the tools. Oh, there you go, Melanie. So, and that is, I'm so glad you brought up TIFF, because my first experiences with AR, VR, and everything interactive or more current was actually at Bell's Digi Playground. So every year around February to April, I guess, Bell puts on a digital playground for kids, and they bring in some cool interactive technology like the sandbox that comes to life, and it just was some of the first experiences for me and with my nephews, I've seen how VR and AR could be used for that learning experience. Lots of female portraits taking selfies. Jim, we have to work on that. Kelly, to see the chat portion, it should be on the side. Maybe Louise can help you with that. Jennifer, that sounds cool too. So what was really cool though is as much as we're seeing this rise of VR and AR in society, we're also seeing ISTE, which is the Institute for Studies in Technology Education. They were also pushing it. So AR and VR was one of their 5 things for this school year. So again, it pushes us and reminds us to have that conversation. What it exactly looks like, I don't think we've all explored just yet, but that's why the conversation tonight is so important. And then this is some of the struggle, I think, when we look at the terms virtual reality and augmented reality. I was doing some research for tonight, just making sure I'm not telling you guys the wrong thing. And it was cool. Steve Bambury, and you'll see him in the resource collection at the last slide. He talks about a continuum of you have that real world on the one end, that physical world we live in every day, and on the other end you have that full virtual reality experience. And for full virtual reality, I think we see a world created that we weren't in before. So again, what comes to mind is a lot of those games in the past or Sims experiences where you would be immersed in an environment walking around that world. I keep thinking of the Big Bang Theory when they had some of those crazy games come into mind. But within that, from that extreme experience, from those extreme ends, we have this mixed reality that happens at each point. So now when we look at tools like Google Expeditions, we're pushing that boundary of it being virtual reality, but it's still actual captures of our environment. We're bringing in augmented reality, which is adding that layer on. So with virtual reality, we're really looking for that immersive experience. Sometimes it's computer generated, but then we also have that opportunity to tap into those photospheres and the 360 videos that we often see online. With augmented, and for virtual reality, I always think of the goggles whenever you see goggles, or the Google Cardboard experiences. With augmented reality, we're looking at that layer on top of the real world. So when I think augmented reality, I think of Instagram filters. Folks probably know that one that brightens up your face. There's a pretty filter, or there's the sunlight rainbow filter, and they move with you, right? So when we move with those Snapchat filters or those Instagram story filters, they are adding that augmented layer of reality onto us. I think we can simplify it a bit though, where sometimes we have a lesser experience. And Natasha, I think the ROM example would probably be just that, where we kind of have a prompt that brings a model to life. It's not necessarily altering our reality, but it's augmenting that experience. So we maybe can rotate it in 3D, explore in some regards, but it isn't always attached to the user like we would see in a filter. Does that kind of make sense to people? Want to give me a thumbs up or a happy face if it does? Oh, Cyril, you had to make it hard. I think when I was looking at it, and probably, so a HoloLens, I think, would fall closer to the virtual reality end, but I don't think it's the whole virtual reality end. Does that make sense? I'll just see quickly if I can find the words that Steve was using. So he had 3 words that he was using. One was called augmented reality versus augmented virtuality. Yeah, so augmented virtuality, real content augments a virtual world. So I don't know if a HoloLens is that or if it really still fits under the augmented reality. That's a great question for someone like them that probably knows. And love the happy faces. That's awesome. So with that in mind, I think we want to talk a little bit about the benefits. And I've been really toying with this because as we look at using any tool in education, we definitely want to maximize tools. We want to use them to enhance the engagement or the experience, learning experience of our users. Thanks, Dave. HoloLens is mixed reality. So Dave, you're saying it's in between the two? Awesome. We'll take your word for it. Natasha, if you tweet them out, then I can drop the link in a little bit. So coming back to those benefits, I think we want to see how we can really use virtual reality and augmented reality to enhance or engage our learning experience. And to me, Louise, I think, is going to drop them in again. That was a great link that Steve had. Steve Bambury had created just a quick little checklist. And just from my own experience, I think part of it is that engagement piece of sparking an inquiry or sparking an exploration. Recently, Jane and I were looking at some famous landmarks with some grade 3s as they were exploring structures. And just being able to have that physical view allowed us to prompt that conversation in different ways. Being able to look around to the environment and to understand why they would put a structure in that place, as well as taking a closer look to each of its pieces. So I think part of it is really that engagement and that being able to play with models and ideas. But I think another really cool piece that is being kind of explored, especially with virtual reality, is the concept of empathy. And how can we use virtual reality to foster empathy in the viewer that's looking at a text. So there's a TED Talk there by Chris Milk, and he in particular did one of the UN virtual reality clips, but there's so many pieces that we can kind of explore in that regard. But since there's a lot of folks that have great experiences with augmented reality and virtual reality, did you see any benefits for bringing it into the classroom? If you want to drop it into the chat box, that's great. And Louise is reassuring us we can get the links later, so no worries to catch them now. Dave, that's a great one, and that's definitely on Steve's list of being able to give kids that access. And I think we definitely see that with things like Google Arts and Culture and why they even created the tool. But being able to give kids that experience of taking them to places they've never had access to before is huge. Yeah, Natasha, that was one I was trying to look at tonight because I remember a few years back at the Digi Playground, they had the little mind scanner. That sounds so like high-tech, weird. If anybody remembers the name, feel free to drop it in. And I was surprised to see that there isn't a ton of VR experiences that are designed for that self-regulation or for meditation. There are some for Google Play, but even yesterday on the drive home, I was listening to a game developer, and they were talking about how they built mindfulness into their game design and just the ethical elements that come into game design. And it had me thinking about how could we use VR and AR in that same respect. So definitely some possibilities there. Connection to the environment for sure. And I think that's really it, right, James? It lets us go to places that we haven't, we're opening those doors to kids for places that they may never have a chance to explore. Yeah, for sure. There's a great Google expedition that talks about the rainforest and being able to have some of those conversations. That's it for sure. And on top of Google Street View, bringing in some of the tools within Google Earth, I think they can really enhance that experience as well. And I know it's loose, so some purists may get mad at me. But I think even when we're using Google Earth on the iPad and you have that, or Google Street View, and you have that motion piece, I think we can have that same experience or those same benefits we would see with some of the traditional virtual reality. All right. All things in moderation. That's it, Louise. And that's definitely a caution or an element that we'll try to bring up tonight. And hopefully I did put that in the flow. So we want to take a bit of time over the next few minutes to just look at some examples. It may be a little sluggish just because we want to make sure you guys all can see what we're exploring. And Louise, that's why I do like some of the augmented reality pieces. And we'll try to touch on a few because I know folks have talked about outdoor learning and just some of the possibilities there. All right, so let's dive in a little bit and let's explore some options. So we're going to go with virtual reality first because I think it's some of the tools we're most used to. And then we will switch over to some augmented reality ideas. So we'll look at some virtual reality apps. We'll pause and see if other folks have some suggestions and some ideas. And then we'll dive into the augmented reality if that's okay. Great suggestions there. All right, so folks, we're going to try this. Hopefully the tech cooperates. I'm just going to see if I can share my device. And we are going to share my phone. Hopefully, any second. Sorry, just 1 second. It was too smooth in the run through. Oh no.
You know what? I have a suggestion for you, Tina. Let me try taking away your moderator privileges and then giving them back and see if that restarts it for you.
Okay.
Oh, Blackboard, you were doing so well. One suggestion, if you felt like this would work, Tina, you could log out, log back in again, and I'm really confident that that will work. I bet you I can diagnose that you are using a Mac. Am I right? Looks like we're in. Tina, your microphone's not on, just in case. You need to know that.
Thanks for letting me know, Louise. I've been talking to myself. Thank you guys for your patience. I don't see a lot of yellows there, so that's awesome. So I put our tools there, and nobody's going to know my password, in a little folder. And when we look at some of those experiences, the first one that I kind of explored was the Google Spotlight stories. So even if you're just looking for a different way to do some storytelling, please check the videos before. They're not all meant for kids. So as you flip through, they've just created some different virtual experiences. Some of them don't even have any vocabulary or any narration. So a great way of just getting into those stories over time. I'll just make sure everybody can get in. Anybody try out Google Spotlight stories before? You can drop it into the chat box. Yeah, so I think this could be a cool way if you need some friends to de-escalate or need just an opportunity to reflect or even something to explore just to see what the experience is about. Google Spotlight stories can definitely do that. And I think it really speaks to that full virtual experience. that we were talking about, where it really is a virtual world. It isn't as intense as being an individual in that virtual environment, and I haven't really found a ton of resources that allow you to do that through an app. Maybe somebody has a tool to suggest. I think the go-to that we see with Google is really Google Expeditions. And when we look at Expeditions, it's awesome that they've now added that Explore on Your Own piece. How many people have used Google Expeditions? It seems like a lot of folks have. You can just give us a thumbs up or a happy face in the voting. So it's new to a few people. Awesome. So if you guys are okay with it, I'll just give you a little bit of a rundown of Google Expeditions. I feel like if there's any app, this is really the app to explore. I've probably made you play with it before, Jen. So with Google Expeditions, we have a couple tools with Google to really explore that virtual environment. And like James and some others have said, giving people that opportunity to visit places and spaces that they maybe can't traditionally access. So we definitely have Google Earth, and I'll just go out and see if I can show you that. So Google Earth has been updated, and there's a lot of great features in Google Earth that allow us to explore in new ways. So one of the ones I really enjoy is up there on the top where you see the ship's wheel. When we tap on that, it actually has little trips, and I'm just trying to go slower so hopefully it's not too leggy for folks. So one of my favorites right now under culture is if I scroll down, they have a tour or a voyage that goes to 20 different countries around the world and lets you go visit their homes. So I'm almost there. It's called This Is Home. This is kind of cool because you can explore it on a Chromebook, different opportunities. I'm sorry I'm going so slow. I usually go faster, but yeah, Jess, we haven't found too big of a problem with Wi-Fi. Now, I know impatient teenagers probably definitely add to the whole experience. When we did it last week with Jane, we did have them double up, so that made it a bit easier. And we did have two that crashed and had to rejoin, but it wasn't too bad. Now in Peel, they've been putting Wi-Fi in for a while, so they've found some of those glitches. I know, I'm sorry. For us, the hardest part is that for Google Expeditions, you have to be on the same network. So that's why something like Google Earth, if you're just wanting to explore, for friends that are in the early years and maybe you want them to have something out that they explore, with some grade 4 or 5 newcomers in Peel, we actually used Google Earth to go to Damascus inside the mosque and to look for patterns. So there's so many ways that we can kind of link it to what we're exploring. But as we go in, you see we have those different communities, and then when we go to those different continents or areas of the continent, it will take us right in, and it will take us right inside the home. So there we go. So we can take a look around and see what it's like. With an iPad, it will actually do it just with their movements and the gyroscope. So I definitely think Google Earth is a great starting point. Google Expeditions adds another layer in that you're truly taking that field trip. And again, folks that have used it add tips and tricks into the box on the side. So with Google Expeditions, we have 2 options. Now we have 3 actually. So with Google Expeditions, we can either be the lead or the guide or the follower, sorry. So we have the lead there, which is our guide, and we have the explorer, which would be our students. So as a teacher, I would go in, and as a lead, I would find the expeditions that I would be interested in. I love that they have a Parks Canada one, festivals around the world. We've used this Rainforest one as well. So many really cool options there. So I've set it to only my downloaded ones to show up. I can turn that off and look for different ones at any time. As I go in, I can pick that Google Expedition, and then for me, I have different scenes. So for example, and hopefully it doesn't, not too much of a lag for folks. So I can take people to the grasslands. So I can take a preview just myself and see what we notice. So as we're talking about regions, political and physical regions of Canada, what a cool way to kind of spark that inquiry. And if you go into Parks Canada's website, they actually have 360 views of every park in Canada. So you definitely can find them all. Jen, remind me of that question in a minute, and I have a link for you there. So if I wanted to run my Google Expeditions and send it to my student devices, all I have to do is say that start. So that will send it to my students. And you can see they have a bit of a annotation for them. And I can help point out different objects for them, as well as bring on some of those different layers. The other tool that we really liked last week when we were using it with structures was you often have a pen tool, so you can highlight objects you see. So we were looking at a structure in Amsterdam that they created. Hopefully I got this right. Jane, you can correct me. A structure in Amsterdam that they had built for the expo that they were going to pull down but kept up. And it really challenged students thinking around strong and stable structures because it used spheres and kind of anchor lines. So we were able to use it as a great provocation for our conversations. Definitely could bring in the I Spy idea. Now, to your point, Jen, around Indigenous perspectives, I haven't found anything specific, but one of the tools that recently was created, and I'll just see if I have it here, and is this one here called Cesky VR. I didn't put it on my list to show you tonight because unfortunately you do need the goggles to see it. So it looks a little funky for everybody right now, so I'll go out because this just looks weird. I'll show you the symbol there. Can you see it in the middle? Cesky was actually a VR experience that was created for Canada 150 last year. So it is a compilation of different experiences, including some Indigenous perspectives on water, and even an art piece, music and dance piece that a tribe called Red created. So if you're looking for some of that element, Cesky VR may be something cool to check out. I wouldn't probably do it with the younger kids, but definitely something to explore with maybe intermediate and above. And check out your video clips you're looking at before you explore. So the Cesky app has about 5 or 6 different scenes you can actually explore. Yeah, Louise, a great point. And the other thing to remember too, sorry, I don't know why my phone keeps locking, is that in YouTube now has 360 video. So even if we're just exploring animals with something like grade 2s, National Geographic has great content that allows you to explore in 360. Whether you use the visor or even as long as you have the YouTube app on your device, whether it's a phone or a, this probably won't work, so we won't do that. Whether it is a phone or an iPad, as long as you have the YouTube app, you can go into 360 mode and have the motion piece or the goggles piece. So a great way, again, of bringing that element in. So I'm just going to stop sharing for a second. And we're going to go back here to our question. Do you have any ideas to share? Any great VR apps that you've explored that you think the group should know about? Any ideas come to mind as you look at Google Expeditions? Glad you're liking the ideas. Was there something there that kind of piqued your interest? Wondering if there's an expedition on the topic? There's actually I'm going to Paris next week. I know, I'm sorry folks. But it was funny because Google Earth has started to do some food paths or food trails as well. So we'll give you 1 minute if you're still thinking or typing. I see some folks are typing away before we move on to augmented reality. Yeah, definitely. One of the ones I forgot to show you, I can't believe I just did that. Check out the New York Times VR. So New York Times VR has some great clips. One of the clips in New York Times VR is Displaced. It follows 3 kids that have been displaced by war. One in Syria, one in the Ukraine, and one in Sudan. So when we're talking about that empathy piece, Jen, I think it's huge. But they also have some great environmental issues, even around water and the Arctic, as we're exploring that topic. Again, the UN app, and we'll add these to the resource list later. The UN app has 3 videos. One is Clouds Over Syria, which is a TED Talk that you saw linked earlier on, and kind of the go-to clip, or the go-to VR experience that kind of changed the game. And then they also have 2 that follow students, a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old in Africa, and their access to water. So again, when we're trying to build that empathy or that environmental piece, huge. Jazz, when we get to augmented reality, we'll talk a little bit about the math and the sciences, but definitely, Jazz, for me, I felt, especially with math, being able to use them as provocations. So being able to go to Damascus and look for patterns within the mosque. It was funny how, for them, a lot of the kids in the room had been to Damascus. So for them, it was a sense of security. So we talk about going to places that maybe they've never been, but it's also a way for us to bring places, their home and their safety back into the classroom. So it was huge for us in that regard. And there were so many beautiful patterns right within the design of the architecture. Yes, James, great point. There's definitely ones that take you to space. There's ones that take you into the human body. When we're looking at all of our environmental pieces, as folks pointed out, so from the rainforest to deforestation, lots of great opportunities there. There's also, when we look at Google Earth that we mentioned, they even had some around the after effects to the hurricane. So being able to see it on the Earth, and then being able to see the satellite view over time. So some really great options there too. Yeah, Asma, a great point with the geometry and the explorations. Natasha, that's awesome. It reminds me of the Design Exchanges exhibit. Be cool to see if they tap into VR a bit more. Oh, Jan, I have apps for you when it comes to space. But definitely, Google Expeditions lets you go in a space, the International Space Station. And there's one scene in Google Expeditions that lets you actually look through and see where they sleep, and you can see where their stocking is on the wall with some of their home items. Just so cool for kids to kind of explore and see what they notice. That everything's taped down to the table. Again, the trick with Google Expeditions is that it is a guided experience, so you would be doing it as a small group. But that's where Google Map Tracks and Google Earth give you that experience if you're looking at more that free exploration. James, I'm gonna have to check that out. That's awesome. Are we okay to go on to augmented reality? Hopefully that's all right for folks. Do you need parent permission? Melissa, for Google Expeditions? Now for Google Expeditions, you don't need parent permission because they don't need to sign in. So again, for us in the K-8 world, that magical age of 13 is a bit of a hurdle sometimes. But because they join as followers and you're the lead, they can actually join without signing in. so we don't need that parent permission. The other thing to just be cautious about is sometimes when we see VR, we see that with VR they say you should be 13. Definitely for all of the gaming systems. So when you're talking about Samsung Gear, the HoloLens probably has it as well. They all put an age limit of 13 on it. Google Cardboard says to use it in moderation and being supervised, because I don't know if other people have experienced this with VR, and I get queasy doing the full VR. So when you have that total blackout, it can really set somebody a little off. So with Google Cardboard, you still have light coming in. That being said, if you're dealing with really young friends, kindergarten, grade 1, remember you can use that movement piece. I probably would just do the movement piece over using the goggles. When we did it with grade 3s last week, they did pretty well with it. We just made them sit down because they would stand in circles and walk in circles forever and make themselves dizzy. So that's not so great. So making them sit down and find a space where they could get around is good. Yeah, Natasha, I was surprised because I love Google Expeditions, and when one of our schools got the Samsung award, so they got a set of Samsung Gear and 360 cameras, and I thought I was going to pass out. It was really interesting to notice the difference, to really, that the two kind of have that different experience. Yeah, and giving yourself that option, that knowing that, especially with Google Expeditions, there's just a little corner piece. You click on it and it goes to full view. So we don't need to have that experience. Even with one iPad in the classroom, we could go somewhere together and have a navigator kind of explore. All right. Okay, we're on to augmented reality, folks. Thank you so much. So we want to look a little bit at augmented reality. I think to me this is one of the most exciting pieces, but it can also feel like it's one of the most novel. So trying to really make sure that we use it in purposeful ways. So I'm definitely interested to hear your ideas, but I wanted to share just a couple apps with you if that's okay. So we're going to do this switcheroo again where I show my phone. And I fixed my screen this weekend, and they must have put my delay, my shutdown to a new level. All right, folks, can you see my screen? Hopefully folks can. I see there's a little delay, so I'm just going to open the page here. So when it comes to augmented reality, I think there's so many possibilities. And one of the things that I was really challenged with was that I think sometimes we are actually experiencing augmented reality without even knowing it. So the one that challenged my thinking was just using Google Translate. Have people used the app before? So traditional app, you use the speech tool, you can do the draw tool, but they've added this new feature into the app, and hopefully it works with my dark room here, where you can actually take a picture. So I can hold it over my page. Sorry, folks. Thank you for tweeting. And it will change the language. So let me just open a page in the book to do this. And I did it in Italian so I could actually make sure that it was translating it right. But you can kind of see how you can quickly go in and translate anything you want. This was huge for me this summer in Quebec as we were walking through the fjord with French signs. Being able to hold it up and make sure we were going in the right direction made all the difference. And any language that you have selected, so we were doing it in Arabic earlier, and again the camera, and I can even switch the direction of the text so it does it the right way. So it's kind of funny to see that we have that augmented reality sometimes. There you go, Jane. We have augmented reality built into apps that we're already exploring. Definitely isn't fantastic for full paragraphs, but for short segments or short words. I'm assuming Kathy. I think it could be really cool for building some of that piece. Now, Google Translate's tools are awesome, even just the audio features, but building on that piece. So Melissa, great point. So how is it augmented learning? So when we just look, I'm so sorry, folks. Should have fixed that there. When we look at something like Google Translate, the app in itself isn't necessarily augmented reality. If we're using the audio feature there that we see, or the drawing tool, what's augmented is that we're taking that layer of reality, my book, and then we're adding a digital layer on top. So when I go to that page, so it's not actually changing the book. So if I move the book stays the same, but it's changing that piece of text. Does that make sense? And it kind of got me thinking, because I think there's so many pieces where that comes into play. Apps that probably have it built in that we just haven't even realized that we're using that augmented reality. Like everyone that uses filters over time. But I think there's also a lot of other apps that kind of build on that. We have quick tools like Blippar. I don't know if people have seen Blippar. I'm starting to explore Blippar as a tool for creation, so that's something I need to work on. But Blippar will actually let you scan things, and watch it not work now. There we go, and it actually will give you words. So again, for our step 1 friends, I love that it says cake, that's not so good. It can even just bring up some of those vocabularies. I think they think I'm having much more fun than I am right now. But you can see some of those pieces and we can use it to explore. But for me, I'm really looking at some of those science explorations, so coming to Jazz's point. And one tool that's been really hot on Twitter lately is the Mega Cube, Merge Cube. Now, unfortunately, in the States, this Merge Cube is only $1. Up here in Canada, it's still $19, but keep your eyes out. Maybe it will go on sale soon. So with augmented reality, there's usually a trigger that starts the augmented experience. So think again about your filters, and when you're doing your filters, your face prompts that little dog ears to pop up. So with this tool, what we're doing to do the trigger is we're using a little cube that you buy. So we'll do the Explorer one here first, and I don't know if you'll be able to see the cube. We'll try it here. Thank you for your patience. Just felt like it was more fun to show you guys. So I'm just going into phone mode. I'm going to skip this. Oh, you can't see the cube. So let me go to my camera just so you can see really quick. So this is the Merge Cube. It just has some different scenes on it. And they have some apps that you can download. Some are free, like the 2 I'm showing you, and then there's some paid ones. And as it sees the cube, it brings it to life. So this one's a really cool one, and I could see, to your point, Jazz, using it as a provocation for our science exploration. So even just as a Minds On, we have a grade 6 class that's looking at space just to get them started. And one of the cool things here is we can actually interact with it. So if I see Earth, we can tap on Earth, and it's going to show me those rotations of Earth. And as I move the cube, I can take a closer look at Earth and see those different elements. Now, we're using the Merge Cube today, but the Blippar app has a space AR exploration. Google Expeditions is coming out with some space explorations, and NASA has some AR experiences for space as well. So lots of possibilities if you don't want to get the cube. Jazz, that's a great point. So when, if you were doing it with the whole class, I would use NASA's Spacecraft 3D app, because the trigger images you can just print on a computer. Or use an app like Blippar, because it's just built into the app. And I'll show you another one in a second where it's just built into the app. I would leave this more as for something that they get to explore as they're looking at some other artifacts, if that makes sense. Because I wouldn't want to necessarily buy one for every kid. maybe I'm just cheap. For $1, it would be awesome, but in Canada, we don't have those prices yet. So just, there's a lot of apps as well that look at exploring the human body. So here, this guy, we can tap on one of the organ systems, and then again, I can rotate, and they have some little information pieces for me there. I wish it was audio. That's my only piece here, because I think for some of our learners, reading the text would be a little tricky. So that's just another option when we're looking at AR. Tons of other options, and what I was really interested in is that some folks are starting to use it as a storytelling tool. And again, this would be more just for your own exploration. The NFB has created this app called The Enemy. It goes through and compares, actually puts virtual individuals in your space, and it looks at two sides of an enemy pair. So you'll have on one side a gentleman from one part of the fight or battle, and on the other side you get to learn and meet someone on the other side of that conflict. And it actually brings us back to the idea of war and what is the purpose or our beliefs about war. So a great app to explore. But even something, and this one was made for the Merge Cube. So with this one, it actually does some, yeah, Jane, could definitely see it as a center that they explore. So this one was kind of cool. You won't hear it, but this, as I rotate, it actually does some of that choose your own adventure stories. I'm going to start a new game, so I'm going to turn it up. And new game. Did I go too wrong? We'll continue my game from before. So it's scenes of the story, and as they play the story, we can't hear it, so it's not as exciting. And eventually, we can turn to the next scene. There we go. Back up or cut the engine. So let's cut the engine. So that really got me thinking into some of those storytelling pieces. Could we use them as a prompt for our students that are creating their own choose your own adventure stories? Or could we use a tool that's similar? But coming more to some of those other models, especially ones that don't necessarily need that physical prompt. I was just exploring JigSpace this week, just looking at some of the options. So even as we look at pulleys and gears in grade 4, and sorry for the messy spot, so I can see it, and it kind of walks us through a model that we can explore. Sorry, bad lighting in here, so it doesn't work as well. So I can pull and take the parts apart and take a closer look at those pulleys and how they're working together. So again, this one has lots of options for us. So as we go through, there's space, there's planets, there's some of that human body as well, and some content to explore. It's interesting to see that, especially with the art kit, like we said, there's some other tools as well that are building on that environment. So when it comes to math, there's one called GeoGebra there that you see at the bottom. I didn't want to show it tonight because I'm still a little stumped on the specifics of how it could be used. But this one was interesting, just that idea of measuring. And again, adding it as a tool with all of our traditional tools that we use for measurement. So I can use the ruler. I need to point to a flat surface. And once it sees it, oh, it may be too dark for us. Dang. Come on, there we go. So once it sees that flat surface, I can start measuring. So if I wanted to measure my bag here, I set a pointer, I move across, and I set my end point. Now I can compare that to this big here. Excuse the mess, folks. And now we could have some proof around what we thought maybe would be longer or shorter. Think about if you're outside and you're looking at some measurements and being able to do some of those bigger measurements and being able to compare those distances over time. This is just one of 3 measurement tools. You also can actually grid out your place, so putting in all your width, height, and depth all on one. You can also do a leveler, which is more for us at home, not necessarily for kids. So for folks that were looking for the name, that's called Tap Measure. So the possibilities with AR, I think, are huge. We're seeing a lot more of that for our storytelling. So my Caterpillar, if you've never checked it out, please, I could use it at home as well. But really seeing a lot of those pieces fall into place. So like we said, NASA 3D, hundreds of different options. It's really just trying to find out how we can link them back to what we're exploring in the classroom. So we just are going to switch this back here, and maybe we can share, is there one in those tools that really piqued your interest? Or is there an idea or an app that you've explored that you think we should check out? Yes, Clara. So I love CoSpaces. We're going to talk about that in a minute as a production device or a tool we can use so that students can create content and not just consume it. Anybody have a tool in that list that you see working for you? One that you want to check out a little more? So we had the Jig app there. We had the Blippar app. We had Tap Measure. We had Google Translate. That's it, Kelly, you're right. The Blippar app, Jazz? Awesome. I forgot, and I'll just switch over as we're chatting. So I can't believe I didn't think of this. I know some of us were talking about the outdoor space. So one of the things I was just noticing on Blippar today, where did Blippar go on me? There we go. So looking at Blippar, one of the things I really was excited about was under the bottom in the little briefcase. Again, talking to what we talked about earlier, there's a solar system. So the solar system will just pop up in your room. So you need a space where you can truly turn around. So I actually can see the solar system all around me. So there it is orbiting. Oh, it's crooked. Sorry, folks. That's not cool. But one of the things that was really interesting was they have an app option in Blippar to actually identify some of the plants that are around you. So I thought a really cool way to bring that connection back to the outdoor world. I know Ranger Ridley for us in Peel, if you, other folks in Ontario don't know him, a great guy. But if you don't want to tweet him, he often can identify things for you. But the app could be a great way to build that exploration and that understanding or that inquiry stance outside. There's some other apps. So there's Quest a Game that turns it into a game similar to Pokemon Go. There's Naturalist. So some great ways of bringing that augmented reality into our natural environments as well. Yeah, definitely great connections to our explorations in plants, habitats, and even biodiversity for grade 6. I'm assuming you would need Wi-Fi, Kelly. I'm trying to think with Quest a Game if any of us tried without Wi-Fi. With Quest a Game, you can add your pictures on later. You kind of lose the augmented piece. But that was one of the catches. So Rob Ridley, I should call him Ranger Ridley. Rob Ridley and I explored in a bit of detail because he was trying to use Aurasma out in the outdoor ed centers, and yeah, we were a little limited when it came to augmented reality in the bush. But Kelly, that's where something like the live beacons could be pretty interesting. If you've ever checked those out, they beam information to you as you go along. So you could maybe see if they could support. I'm wondering if iNaturalist, so similar to Google Translate, you're able to download languages. So I wonder with iNaturalist or some of the other apps, if you could download some of the content so it still works. Something to check out, send me an email, we could play with it for sure. So great ideas, Natasha, around posters. Definitely, we've seen some really cool inquiry trails with augmented reality. The live beacons are definitely cool for that too, as you're exploring to be kind of prompted to think outside the box. So with one of our high schools, we put live beacons around and they did their own scavenger hunt to find the information, and they're going to use them as a prompt for the daily announcements. So the announcements go straight to their devices instead of them having to go search for them. So just looking at time, I'm sorry, Jess, a live beacon's a company, they're a type of beacon. If you Google live beacon, you'll find them. Okay, how about I know that our time is coming closely to an end. We always get into such great chats. So I'll talk quickly about two tools for creating, and I think I'll show Aurasma just because we can do it in the amount of time we have. And Louise, maybe I'll drop a how-to video for CoSpaces together so that we can check that out. So just as you're exploring, Louise, thank you so much for dropping that in. Another great person on Twitter, ICT Evangelist, he created a little periodic table of apps. And they're all AR and VR apps. So just a great option if you're looking for more apps and trying to find different places. So yeah, such great conversations all the time. But that piece that we don't want kids just to be consuming the AR and VR, we want them to see these as tools for them to communicate. I think the two places that really I would explore are CoSpaces and Aurasma. We have started playing with Blippar, and I know there's some like Megaverse that are out there, but I still find Aurasma is the easiest one to start with. So with virtual reality, we use CoSpaces to do a bunch of different things, from visualizing the stories that they're exploring to visualizing historical events, but also for creating dual language text. So I don't know if you can see that there. Last year with some of our newcomers, we explored a bunch of different apps. So at the end of the year, we were looking at how can we create scenes. And I don't know if you can see that there. Using the keyboard on the iPad, students were actually able to label everything both in English and Arabic. So we were able to explore these environments that had both languages included, which was super cool. CoSpaces lets you create really to your heart's content. They do now have an education version, and you used to always have to pay for the education version, but it looks like they're giving us some things for free now, which is nice. Great community online, so you can tap into them at any time as well. It looks like some folks have checked out CoSpaces, like Clara and Jane, and it's a bit harder to show in a short time frame. For augmented reality, and sorry, I just had to blur it out for the faces there. For augmented reality, Aurasma has always been my go-to, and I just noticed a spelling mistake. Just a note, they changed it to HP Reveal, so it must have been bought out by HP recently. You can still find it when you look for Aurasma, same app. but it does the same thing. So last year, one of the friends you see there created a collaborative art piece around Canada for Canada 150. It was from 3 kindergarten classes all got together under the tutelage of an artist. So we wanted parents, when they came in, to be able to hear what the different pieces meant. So what you can see there is some friends that recorded their thinking or about how they made that element. And then we placed them on the art piece so that as parents came and scanned the art piece, they could see the different pieces come to life. Such a cool experience just even for the kids to see that back and forth. But we've done it with self-portraits. Now I need to go scan a dollar bill, James. We've done it with self-portraits. We've done it with objects. But what we did most recently is we actually used Aurasma to do our own book reviews so that people could come in. Oh, love the idea for historical timelines. I would love it for an inquiry trail. And I've seen a couple of folks do it with pictures outside the classroom, and then as they scan the pictures, they could see it come to life. But if folks are interested, I could probably do this in the next 5 minutes just to show you how we could, some of the tricks with Aurasma. Hopefully that's okay with folks. Okay, so what we did with the grade 4s, and literally they were done in about 5-10 minutes. It was pretty crazy. So we had them actually record their video first. So a lot of times with Aurasma, people will record in the app, and I find it often glitches a little bit more. So if we're putting a video as an overlay, we just create that video ahead of time. So some of the basics there. With Aurasma, we need a trigger image. So we need an image. Sorry, we're just going to quickly see if we can get this back up on the screen for us all. Okay. And I just cautious of time, so I don't want to go over time on you. So the trick is we first have to pick a trigger image, an image that will prompt the overlay to pop up. And then on top of that, we want to create our overlay. So our overlay is what people would see on the top of the book. So again, I would have my video already in my camera roll just because it would be easier that way. And then when I go into HP, it does require an account. So I would do a school account. Again, our little guys aren't old enough. Little guys all the way to grade 8. At high school, you guys get the awesome opportunity to not worry about that. But for us in K-7 at least, students aren't old enough. So the other reason for a class account would be that all your auras come together. So we can, if we create them under that one account, then every device that's logged into that account will pop up the different auras. So we don't need to worry about using the same device each time. So right now it's just showing me all my auras I could go to scan, but I'm going to use the plus sign in the corner. The first thing, like we said, is that trigger image, and you need it to be in the green area. So it won't recognize pictures that aren't in the green, so you can kind of see there when it's in the red, I can't really scan. So I'm going to take a picture of that. Now it's asking me to choose my overlay. So we in education don't usually use these overlays that are built in. We go into the device, and great when, there we go, I can pull from different places. So I'm just going to put this fun one on that we just created. I can give it a name. Again, our students in grade 4, they created a little video clip of them explaining why people should read the book, their little book recommendation. I can see what it looks like if I like it. And submit. And done. So now when I go to my scanner on the bottom, and it sometimes takes a second or two to load, there we go. Now again, the difference with augmented reality versus other options is that it follows that book, right? So it will travel with it, and it also doesn't interrupt other artifacts around it. So even if we were giving instructions to our friends, they could have their math manipulatives on the side, and my instructions could be on a little image card or a quick little provocation. So hopefully that helps people get a quick sense of what Aurasma looks like. A great tool to get started if you want to start exploring. I know it's not always perfect. We've also found trigger images that are really standard. Or we did it with Scaredy Squirrel, and every version of Scaredy Squirrel has similar font and a similar picture, so our videos were popping up on each other's. So we had to start doing some problem solving to see how we could make them a bit more unique. So definitely some pieces there, but a quick tool to start with if you're wanting to create some of those augmented experiences. The more unique the picture is, the more unique the trigger is, the better. So before we leave, or as we come to an end, I've just collected a few resources, and we'll put all of these into the resource collection later that you can check out. So we have AR, VR, and education is a great hashtag. There's a group that has Twitter chats just dedicated to this conversation. And Jamie Donnelly was the person that when I first got started in AR, VR, I was connected with. Steve Bambury is the gentleman that we talked about with those 8 benefits and some of those elements, and his website, as well as we have a little collection we created for Peel. So just some resources if you want to continue the exploration. But as we come to an end, I guess it is, what is that one thing that you would like to try or explore? Because we can look at a lot of options, and tonight we looked at a lot of options. But what is it that you would like to take away from our time? Feel free to drop it on the page or drop it into the chat window. Can't wait to see what you say. Kathy, I like Google Expeditions and Aurasma. Awesome. Thanks for joining us tonight. And I definitely see AR and VR as being, at least from the consumption end, being a great place where we can start sparking that inquiry in that exploration. I didn't ever think of it till we started looking at Damascus, the mosque in Damascus, to see how much the place really changed the conversations we were having. Especially when you look at patterns. We often look around us, but these guys were just so stoked to be able to check out the patterns there. Jess, love that you're checking out HP Reveal and CoSpaces. CoSpaces really has unlimited potential. We had some grade 5, 6s last year use it for legend retells. So some were looking at indigenous stories, others were looking at medieval stories. And one of the girls actually figured out how to code her characters, which was crazy. She asked me for help, and I learned more that day than she did. I know that's the hard part, Kathy, is finding space on our devices. Love Google Expeditions and New York Times. Cyril, I'm on my last few Google Cardboards. Unfortunately, we didn't get in on the gig last year. Cesky, the app we were talking about, they were giving them away for free. But people say they're finding new ones all the time, so always keep your eyes open. Yeah, Jane, me too. I need to try exploring that a bit more. That's how we can connect to the outdoor spaces. Melissa, I'm glad you like the tools. Oh, someone's building a website of virtual sources. That's awesome. Do you want to drop the link in the chat box just so we can use it? Yeah, so I did find an app, Jane, for the 360 videos or the photospheres. With photospheres, there's even a Google Cardboard camera app that you can put on your iPhone, iPod Touches, or iPads. And then I found an app called Bubbly that lets you create your own annotations, which seems cool. ThingLink does it, but they charge a crazy amount of money right now, which is a bit of a bummer. So that's the hard part when you're on the cutting edge of some of these pieces of technology, is that they still come with a hefty price tag. But the tools we explored tonight we tried to keep them to free or almost very cheap at least. Well, thank you guys so much. I'm glad we were able to squish it all in. There's so much more we could explore, but I feel like I learned from each of your experiences. And I think Louise has some wrap-up stuff.
I'm going to jump in there, folks. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm going to just quickly hit enter here. Oops, I didn't actually put the Find Tina online stuff. There we go. Thank you, Tina. That was felt like a VR journey of our own in here, which was really cool. There's way more stuff out there than I had known about. I am going to just skip ahead to our thank you page. Yes, thank you, Tina, and thank you to all of you for participating so thoroughly tonight and sharing your own ideas and resources. Please do make sure that we get feedback on your thoughts about tonight's session and topic. I know this is something that's kind of cutting edge on the technology side. You can click that link directly on the screen. I'm going to drop it in the chat as well, just in case. And of course, you'll get your follow-up email that includes the feedback link as well as the resource page link, which is all ready to go. I'm going to go and grab that for you as well. And all those links that have been shared tonight, including the ones that you shared with each other, those are already in there. So feel free to pop in, go read those articles, watch some of those videos and explore, and share them with your colleagues. I'm also going to pop over to this page. These are not clickable links, but as I said at the beginning, you'll be getting a new email from OTF tomorrow that's got all of these sessions linked in it, as well as everything that's now posted for April and May. All of that goes live first thing tomorrow morning. So be sure to jump in there and check out all the upcoming OTF Connect sessions and register for some more that are of interest to you. So thank you everyone for your time tonight. It sounds like there's lots of cool ideas that you're all going to be excited about taking back into the classroom. So thank you, and on behalf of Syria and OTF, thank you so much for giving up some of your precious time to expand your learning to support the learning of your students. So thank you all tonight. Take care, and we'll see you again soon.